Hi, welcome to the show. And today, true to the name of the show, Local Matters, I have a guest with me today that has made a big difference in our local community over many years, and I'm honored to have with me today Dan Corrigan. Thank you so much for being here, Dan.
Well, it's nice to be here with you at Christmas time, Ken.
It's an honor to have you on the show, and I think those people that don't know you are going to know why when we're done. Your enthusiasm, your encouragement, and what you've done through your life is inspirational.
Thank you.
I think people are going to be happy to get to know you, or if they do know you, they say, I know that guy, and he's the greatest. I'm so glad he's on television.
Yeah.
So thanks for being here.
Well, it's humbling.
Well, let's go back. Dan, I think you have done a lot here in the community, but people often are interested, well, where'd you come from? Where'd you grow up? You from far away, nearby? How'd you get here?
Well, I was born in 1939 at the beginning of the war. My dad was a freshman in medical school. And we moved. I was in 10 schools in 12 years because it was wartime, internship, residency. But I had great parents, great family. But from the time I was 5 years old, when the phone rang at night, my dad was a family doctor, I would hear the phone and I'd get up when he did, and I went to the hospital with him.
Well, you'd go with him.
Well, boys want to be with their dad, And I went out on home calls. He had his little black bag, And so I was very comfortable with hospitals all of my life. In fact, I was more comfortable there than most places. I knew what was going on. I knew where the kitchen was and where the food was, and, like a little boy. But I loved being with my dad. And we moved to North Bend, Coos Bay area in the third grade, and he became a member of the North Bend Medical Group. And so we were there for 5 years. That was the longest time in one place until I moved to McMinnville. And I've been in McMinnville in the same house for 45 years.
It's a beautiful spot.
Yes, it is.
Just love to be here myself.
Well, and like most people, I didn't move here because there was some business attraction. I moved here because I wanted to raise my family here. I wanted to be part of the community. Most people that I've met in my life come to McMinnville because they want to be here. And that's what makes it a real community of extended family. People love each other around here. They sacrifice themselves. They put themselves out. They talk to each other. They smile at each other. I walked in the door here and Angela smiled. I felt like, man, I'm okay, I guess,
Well, Dan, your dad was a doctor, and you chose a different profession, and I wonder if it's a one that matches your personality, because you think that's the case?
Well, from the time I was in the first grade, quite by accident, I became a salesman.
Uh-huh.
Now, if you go to a parochial school, they're always having a fundraiser because their schools are broke. And in the first grade, we sold tickets to a drawing for a 5-pound box of fudge.
In the first grade.
And at the end of each week, they had all the students' names on the blackboard, and they wrote down how many tickets were sold. Well, I was first. And that kind of enthused me, so I wanted to be first the next week. So I was always working hard. Well, then all of a sudden, one day, somebody said, how would you like to deliver newspapers? So the first thing you have to do is go bang on all the doors and get some customers. Well, I thought that was more fun than delivering the papers. And then somebody said, why don't you sell magazines? So I knocked on all the doors and said, Mrs. Jones, what's your favorite magazine? And she said, Home and Garden. And I said, if I can get it for you for a lower price, would you buy it for me? And then it was vacuum cleaners, and then it was pots and pans.
Wow.
Well, it was a lot of fun. If somebody needs some pots and pans, I said, if I can go find them for you, how would you like that? So the way I worked, I didn't try to sell things to people. I tried to find out what they wanted and then go get it.
Well, you landed at 23 at kind of a pinnacle for a lot of people on the $1 Million Round Table. Tell us, how'd you get there so fast?
Well, first thing I should tell you is I wanted to be a doctor. My initials are DOC.
Yeah.
Mom saw to that. My mother had a great sense of humor. She always wanted me to be like my dad, but I was like her, or tried to be. But I was at the University of Portland. I was in pre-med majoring in chemistry, and I actually had a 3.8 grade point. But by the time it was time to go to medical school, we had learned that our third child was coming, and we were very poor all the way through college. We lived hand to mouth, and I knew I didn't have enough money to go to medical school, and I was a salesman for a dairy. And the reason was I got more new customers than anybody out in the route, so they put me on the full-time sales crew. And I always tried to write more business than the other 10 guys just for the heck of it. They didn't pay any more. But I would show up there at 5 in the morning with the drivers and go around all the houses and see who moved in that night. And by the time the regular salesman showed up, I had a day's worth of production. And then in the evening when I came in, they had a merry-go-round that put on 5 birthday parties and gave out chocolate milk. Well, I'd check the list and stop by a couple of them on the way home. So by the time I got home, I had a week or two's production in one day just because of what happened. Anyway, one of the customers I got, I built a route in Lake Oswego, and it was a very, what would you say, well-off community. And one of the guys took a liking to me, and he was a regional manager for Hunt's Food. And I knew I couldn't go back to school, so I went to him hoping that maybe he'd offer me a job for selling ketchup. And anyway, I went up to see him, and he said, Dan, if I were you, I'd get in the life insurance business. Now, I got straight A's in math and got F's in spelling and anything related to it. And I had met with 3 life insurance guys, and I couldn't figure out what the deuce they were talking about.
It was a new language.
Yeah, but the numbers didn't add up in my mind. So I wondered, why should I do this? But I really trusted this guy, so I went out and called on every life insurance agency in Portland in my milk clothes after work for the next month. And one company offered me an opportunity to sell health insurance. And since I was a doctor's son, I understood the problems of the health insurance industry. So I started doing that. And then the next year got into the life insurance side of it to go with health insurance. And then the year after was this event you talked about when I was 23.
Well, let's back up. Let's not go to that one quite yet, because you started in health insurance, but how did you make that jump to life?
I simply added that, if you got your medical bills paid, but you pass out of the picture early, what's going to replace the income that you produce for your family? How are you going to do that? And so my thing is, listen, we've got health insurance to pay the doctor so he can pay his bills, but you're going to need some money for your family to pay their bills.
And you started off with getting to know doctors in Oregon.
Right.
You tell us about how you made some deal with a health insurance company.
Well, I called on doctors, dentists, attorneys, and accountants, and they have national health care plans. And Charles O'Finley was the broker for the American Medical Association, which incidentally I got to speak at age 24 in Banff, Canada at a luncheon. It's kind of surprising. But in any event, I called on Charlie Finley, and he gave me the opportunity to broker his disability product to physicians in the state of Oregon.
And you got to know doctors that way, and then started selling them life insurance, and that's how the transition made.
Yeah. Plus the fact, a lot of people knew Dr. Corrigan, my father. In fact, one day I went into the Alpine Cleaners here in town, and the dad, who's with the Lord now, one day said, do you happen to know a Dr. Corrigan down in North Bend? And I said, yeah, he's my dad. He turns around and yells, hey, Alan, come out here. Alan's the guy that runs the place now.
Yeah.
He said, that guy's dad delivered you. My dad delivered about 5,000 babies.
Wow.
And I went to the hospital with him every chance I could.
So now you're doing life insurance. You've gotten a good introduction into Oregon, and a $1 Million Roundtable. That was back in what year?
1963.
And how'd you get there? How'd you do it?
I made a lot of calls. I got up at 5 in the morning and got to bed at midnight, and Sunday was the family day.
Well, I know there's a lot of people that are in sales out there, and they want to know the secrets, right? So you've learned a few.
Yeah.
And they're probably not a secret. When you tell us, it's going to sound...
People are people. And everybody, most people at night when they go to bed at night, they think about what they're concerned about. What do you worry about? What are your concerns?
The kids.
Yeah. And so I try to get people talking to me about what matters to you. What are you concerned about? What are your hopes and dreams for your children, for your family? Do you want them to have an education? You want to have some money someday so you'll have money at work instead of man at work. You know, what goes on? In other words, it doesn't do any good to offer a product. What you have to do is solve problems. Well, you don't know what the problems are unless you talk to people and find out what it is that they're concerned about. What do they want to accomplish in their life? What's their vision for the future? And then I get them to tell me. And then at the end, I say, who's helping you work on your vision for the future? I'll apply for the job.
Yeah.
And that's what I did.
So you'd ask good questions and listen, sounds like.
Well, I had to learn the power and the value of listening. I thought when I started in the sales job, it was about having a good presentation, like Mr. Yak Yak, you know. But about 10 years into the business, I realized that worked, but it didn't work very well. What worked is asking questions and putting duct tape on my mouth and listening and not interrupting people. I learned that people really need to get a good listening to, that it actually empowers them to get all this stuff out on the table and find out what really matters, and then to get a list of priorities, and then to prioritize the priorities. And, you know, it was a wonderful thing, and I didn't feel like I was selling. I felt like I am trying to serve this person. And if they felt that way, I had a lifetime relationship with them.
So the $1 Million Roundtable in that time was quite a peak to reach.
Top 1% in the world.
I see. And you were how old?
23.
And that landed you where? You were at a convention, you were saying?
The annual meeting of Northwestern Mutual, they invited us to the Millionaires Club. I'd never been. I had holes in my shoes and looked like I was 16, and I went back there and I felt about as out of place as I could. But anyway, I went up there. I was the first one to check in. Nobody else had gone in yet. And the lady's checking my name off, and she said, Mr. Corrigan, you're to sit at the head table. I'm head table? Anyway, I went up there. She showed me where to sit down. I sat down. I was all by myself up there. All of a sudden, this elder fella came in and sat down next to me. And after he got settled, I said, what are we doing up here? He said, son, you are Northwestern Mutual's youngest $1 million producer. And I said, well, could I inquire as to why you are here? He said, I am Northwestern Mutual's oldest $1 million producer. Turns out he was exactly 50 years older than me. He was 73, I was 23. And the next day, our picture was at the top of the financial column in the Milwaukee Sentinel in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Well, I thought to myself, maybe this is the end of holes in my shoes. Maybe.
And was it?
Well, gradually. But it was very encouraging. But, you know, if you've been poor most of your life, counting the hot dogs in a package and such as that, which I did regularly when I was going through college, we had family. In the old days, before it was highly mechanized, a lot of times there were 13 hot dogs in a package instead of 12. And I'd find them if I could.
Wow, that's an experience a lot of us don't have, is looking for an extra hot dog in a package.
Well, and you know, I got up at 2:30 to deliver the newspapers. Then I went to school, and then I went out and sold vacuum cleaners, and then I got a job in between. I had one 2-week period where I didn't go to bed. I was pulling on the green chain, but I had a father and uncles who knew the value of hard work. I learned from them, and I wanted to be like them. And, you know, I taught my sons, you know, your job is to be a spiritual leader, protect your family, and provide for your family. If you do those three things, then your wife can do the 100 things she has on her list. But if you don't do it, and, you know, God first, family second, and then community means your profession as well as the way you serve in your community. But those are the three things. And I learned that from having a godly father and mother, and for having uncles who were hardworking guys, and I wanted to be just like them.
Well, Dan, I know that you were very successful and were on the $1 Million Roundtable many times, and provided for your family spiritually and financially, and then also were able to reach out to your community. And you have a wonderful history here in town, and that's one reason I was excited to have you on the show, so
Thanks.
people could meet the person and hear about some of those early day activities that you were part of, putting things together. You helped out. Back in the old days, there weren't many athletic teams in town, so you saw that problem. What went
Well,
on?
what happened, actually, I joined clubs because I wanted to rub elbows with people. And the Chamber of Commerce always had an opportunity. And one of the opportunities that came up was the year that the bond issue didn't pass and there were no longer after-school athletics in grade school. So I, along with a bunch of other parents, we got together every night and formed the McMinnville Athletic Club. And the purpose of it was, we lost 90% of our coaches because they put us into the Metro League against Beaverton, Sunset, Jesuit. Here we are, this little town with no resources, going up against Beaverton University and Sunset Tech,
Yeah.
And the kids were discouraged and the coaches quit. So we formed this club. And the first year we had 52 basketball teams. Doesn't take a lot of resource if you can rent the gyms. And there were 5 girls teams and 47 boys teams. And we sponsored track meets and cross-country meets. And we showed up, we had so many of us, we showed up after every athletic event with oranges and fruit.
So the kids were excited to be there, not just for the sports, but
it
for
got the parents involved. And if you were a parent that couldn't come to a game, you knew that your buddies in the neighborhood were going to be there to support your kid. And one thing after another would come. Like one year we built tennis courts at the high school. Another year we raised enough money to build a new football scoreboard. Another year a javelin runway. There was always a project. And, that's what people do. Many hands make light work.
And you were one of the many hands over and over again. Now, you mentioned the chamber being a place to, make connections, but you have a history in the chamber itself. You were president. What year were you president?
1979.
And what happened that year?
Well, we wanted to include the villages around McMinnville. At that point in time, there was less than 10,000 people in McMinnville. And there were about 50,000 people from around the area that would shop in McMinnville from the Oregon coast and whatnot. But the farmers that were trying to produce wine were only getting $2.50, $3 for a bottle of wine. And it takes so long before you can have any revenue from the time you first plant your vines. We decided, why don't we do something to promote the wine industry, to try to help them? And so we met for 2 weeks every night.
Now, who was this group that met?
Former presidents of the McMinnville Chamber,
Okay.
chamber people, a bunch of folks like that. And anyway, at the end of 2 weeks, 20 of the past presidents agreed to put up $4,000 each, $80,000 to fund an executive for the first year and the expenses of advertising. And she was such a sensation, Susan Sokolblosser, that we made enough money from the first celebration to finance the second and so on. We never had to put capital up again. But the interesting thing is that by the time we got done figuring out all the details, we realized we didn't have a name. And so we decided to name it the International Pinot Noir Celebration, which really begs the question of these guys in McMinnville, what are we doing being the international? And anyway, the second year, Robert Drouin of the Drouin estate, there's 5 estates in Burgundy, France, came and spoke at Linfield at our second celebration. And he said at that meeting, you folks don't know this, but there's not room for one more route in Burgundy, France. Our kids have no future here. So I'm announcing today we have purchased land in the Dundee Hills, and we're going to build a state-of-the-art winery. Now, most of the wineries were boutiques, couple $100,000. This was going to be a $10 million winery, gravity-fed, 4 levels down, grapes at the top, truck goes out the bottom. Well, that was like the shot heard around the world. in the wine industry, as well as David Lett taking his Pinot to New York City, and they couldn't distinguish between Yamhill County Pinot and Burgundy Pinot. Well, that really got things going. And so it was fun to be part of the original group that started that, because in the early days, a couple 100,000 of income for the state of Oregon was all that wine produced. By 2015, it was $3 billion. So we sort of felt like we were a little bit of, we got to go on the ride on that deal.
And the festival has just gotten more and more attention, more and more draw from around the world, and it's incredible to this
Who
day.
would ever
to this
think
day.
these yokels, guys like me sitting down there scratching their head, what can we do? What do we know about it, you know?
Now, you've been associated with Linfield. You don't miss games.
Well, I have in recent years, but back in the old days, I took my boys over to Linfield every night and run them up and down the court so I could get them to sleep at night.
Uh-huh.
And
Your boys, let's just pause there. How many boys?
7.
Yeah.
We had to recruit the girls.
Okay, so you're running the boys up
I
and down.
teased my sister when I was young, and I got punished for it. That's why I didn't have any girls.
Oh, that's a sad story. So you've got a basketball team with 2 reserves on the bench. Anyway, you're over at Linfield, and you're running them up and down.
Well, I went to all the basketball games, and my one year, Mark Wickman was a freshman that came to Linfield from Astoria, and he started as a freshman. He was by far the best athlete on the basketball court, and we had some really good ones. Larry Doty is an example. But in any event, he was NAIA Player of the Year his junior year, but he was even a better student than a basketball player. And more than that, he was known for his Christian dedication. And so every chance I got a chance to visit with him, we visited. Well, many years later, he called me from Southampton, England, and said, "Hey, Dan, any chance we could get in business together?" And I said, "Give me a day to think about it." And I called him back the next day. He was in Southampton, England. And I said, "Come on, I don't know how we'll do it, but let's do it." And so a few weeks later, he showed up in this great big long Penske truck with all of his possessions, and we formed he became my employee in 1996, but I treated him like a partner, and eventually we changed the name from Corrigan and Associates to Corrigan Wickman. And 5 years ago, when Tommy Patterson came along, an outstanding young man who had won the Triple Sport Award that we award every year from Corrigan's, he had won that, and we have a picture of the 3 of us out in front of the building when Tommy was in high school. He's in his 30s now. But anyway, that's how I got involved with Mark, and it really added a new dimension to our business. We were able to do financial planning, and it expanded our investment and retirement business to become more planning oriented.
Now, you you sold health insurance. Your dad was a doctor. You're concerned about the health of the community. You reached out in a way over with the hospital. Tell us about that.
You know, that was so easy because I was in hospitals with my dad all the time. Got to the point where I liked being in hospitals, and it made me feel like I was doing something. Well, anyway, when the chamber had groundbreaking for the new hospital, guess who was out there? You know, along with the other guys. And so I became a volunteer at the hospital for this and for that and so on. Well, when the cancer center was formed, before then, you had to go to Portland or Salem for cancer treatment. And when you're really sick from chemo and radiation, that is really hard. So we wanted to have a center here in town so people didn't have to make that trip. And I can't tell you the doctor's name that started it. I've forgotten it, but he was an outstanding person. His pictures in the hospital and the cancer center. But it became evident that when people are treated for chemo and radiation, they can't work for a few months. They're too sick. Kind of like the Bucket List movie, if you remember that one. And so what happens is you can't work. Who's going to pay your health insurance or pay for groceries or provide rent? So we decided to start a foundation. Eric Swenson's idea. He's a doctor, a surgical doctor at the hospital, and we formed a group. In fact, I was the original chairman of that, which was a lot of fun. And because of a lot of efforts by the Rotary Club and other people, we were able to help 55 to 75 people a year get through those first 3 or 4 months and then back to work. That's really something, because in 15 years, that means that we've helped whatever 15 times 60 is, I guess that's about 900. And we have $1.5 million now in the foundation that we're able to put those funds out for. Well, I don't know how we got that done, but what I do know is that when a group of people get together with a common cause and they're committed, you know the old story about the pig and the chicken, if you want ham and eggs, one's committed and one's involved, you know?
Yeah, that's a little high level of commitment, isn't it?
Well, the truth is, when you're committed, providence moves in. And all unforeseen manner of things happen. Doors open and things happen that would never happen if you hadn't been committed. That's Goethe out of the 17th century. And now that I'm a geezer, I know that's true. You stick to something, you're going to get it done.
Education. You've been a part of an education here in the community. What involvement did you have?
Well, I was always going to school meetings and school groups, and you know, the MAC Club supporting the kids was part of that. But we started I was one of the McMinnville Education Foundation, and Kids on the Block. Kids on the Block was an enrichment program for kids after school. Many kids in our community were going home and watching TV. We wanted something where they could get music and history and geography and a variety of things. And so one of the great past controllers at Linfield College, whose name escapes me, wonderful man, he got this idea, and we got together and we founded the Kids on the Block.
Wow.
And, you know, all of these things happen because of teamwork. Everybody brings something to the table. You know, you can't bring what you don't got, but what is it you have that you can bring? You know, if you got two people, 1 and 1 is 2, but if they harmonize together, when you get 2 ones together, they have the power of 11. When you got 10 people, you got 1 million. That's strength.
Well, Dan, you have been an inspiration to those people that want to matter in some way in the community. And I think hearing your story about how you would go out and get involved with some vision and some energy and some dedication and commitment is inspiring. I know it is to me. I have a copy of I've got your card here. And here's what you put on your card as you're kind of describing you as what you do, right? Encouragement, financial advisory, public speaker, business owner, Gideon member, industry consultant, family of 41, 20 grandkids, relationship building and inspiration.
Yeah, I had to come up with a new card when I retired.
That is great. Well, Dan, it's been almost 30 minutes, but I wanted to give you an opportunity if you wanted to. What have you want to leave us with?
This is a rather personal statement, but I need to tell you that the most important thing I learned in life is about my spiritual commitment. I'm a born-again Christian, no doubt, no turning back. My father was the same, and I'm so grateful that I finally understood what he did. Because he taught me that Jesus is the way, Jesus is the truth, and Jesus is the life. And this is the season where we celebrate God's greatest gift to humanity, the Lord Jesus. And you know, if you had a chance to have life eternal in the best conditions ever, as opposed to knowing that you're going to die and it's all over with, or maybe you'll go to a place that's not so nice, which would you want to go for? Now, there's no guarantees, one could say, but I've been a Gideon for 50 years, and I believe God's word in the Bible is inerrant, meaning that it is the truth, and it's existed for all these thousands of years. And I believe that if you feast on the word, one of our sheriffs, Emmylou Zamora, when she left town when her husband passed away, as she went out the door, she said, Dan, don't ever forget, feast on the word. And the word has helped me have a beacon, a light to follow, to lead my family. And I got that from my loving father who was probably the most godly person I ever knew.
Well, Dan, the light definitely shines from you. Thank you
Thanks.
very much. Thanks for being here.
Well, it was a pleasure. Merry Christmas.
You too.